IS3. It's Mrs. Hamilton here, and I'm going to take you through your task for this week, which is a creative response to the text A Midsummer Night's Dream. I just wanted to remind you, first of all, though, of your BGE folio, okay? Now, your BGE folio is meant to be a really good practice, a trial run of the folio that you'll do in fourth year. Your BGE folio must include at least one broadly discursive piece and at least one broadly creative piece. Now, you've already completed a broadly discursive piece with your persuasive essays. Now we're moving on to doing a creative. And a creative could be anything to do with creative writing or a non-fiction piece like reflective writing. For this folio then, we are going to look at a creative response to A Midsummer Night's Dream. And we're going to focus on particular on the character Puck. Now, Puck's a really interesting character because he wasn't invented by Shakespeare. He was actually based on English mythology, and he turns up quite a lot in different stories. He's always very mischievous. He sometimes gets referred to as a fairy or a sprite or as a jester. I think in A Midsummer Night's Dream at some point he also gets called a hobgoblin. So he's usually quite a funny looking creature. He's known as the most important character in the play, and I'm just going to read out this section here that came from Spark Notes. The mischievous, quick-witted sprite sets many of the play's events into motion with his magic, by means of both deliberate pranks on the human characters, transforming Bottom's head into that of an ass, and unfortunate mistakes, smearing the love potion on Lysander's eyelids instead of Demetrius's. So in other words, if it wasn't for Puck, none of the story would happen. And remember that this story is known as a farce, which basically means if something could go wrong, it will go wrong, and it's meant to be quite humorous. And Puck is the centre of all that. He's the one that either makes stupid mistakes or deliberate mistakes because he loves causing chaos. So I really want to focus on Puck when we do this bit of writing. We're going to look then at writing our own drama scripts. Now, when you write a drama script, your stage direction should be minimal. There shouldn't really be any description other than what's in the stage direction. You would tell the story through dialogue. So in other words, through whatever the characters say to one another or to themselves or to the audience, that's how you find out what's happening. There can be soliloquies and asides, and don't worry if you're not sure or you can't remember what they are. And structure is super important. So what are stage directions then? Well, stage directions are the notes that you see usually in italics in your play, and they're the directions that the director or that Shakespeare gives to the director or the actors or both, so they know when to come into a scene, when to exit a scene, where to stand, etc. When it comes to Shakespeare, unlike people like, for instance, Arthur Miller, Shakespeare's stage directions are very minimal. They're pretty much in they come and out they go. So when you do your drama script, that's all I really want to see is just either explaining when a character enters a scene or when a character exits the scene. Now let's go on to different conversation techniques, which includes dialogue, soliloquies, monologues, and asides. So dialogue, I'm sure you've heard of before, and that's when there is speech between two or more characters on stage. Both soliloquies and monologues are to do with a character talking on their own. And the only really difference is, in a soliloquy, the person is the actor on stage, the character is only talking to themselves. Whereas a monologue is more dramatic and happens usually when there's a moment of crisis, and they're still talking on their own, but they tend to have an implied audience. So it tends to be a big speech, and they're looking directly at the audience when they say their piece. That's why it tends to be known as a dramatic monologue. Asides are my favourite techniques. And what happens in an aside is when there's more characters on the stage, but then one or sometimes two, but tends to be one character goes to the side of the stage and just says something. Usually they've got like a sneaky plan about everyone else on the stage, and they're trying to bring either someone along to talk to them about the sneaky plan, or they just tell the audience. I would suggest if you're writing a scene about Puck and Puck's doing something really silly or sneaky, and he's doing something maybe to wind someone else up or to cause a bit of chaos, you probably want some asides in there where he speaks to the audience really quietly. But remember, the rest of the characters are still on stage. And what that does is you get an idea of what that character's thinking, what they're planning. There's a bit of suspense because then there's dramatic irony because you know what's going on, but the rest of the characters don't. But you still get to see all the other characters go about their day-to-day life. at the same time. So I love that technique. Let's think about the structure then. I'm only going to ask you to write one scene. You're not writing a whole play. That would take you far too long. Okay, and I only want you to have one setting as well. Because otherwise, if it was a different setting, you'd be on to a different scene anyway. First of all, you need to decide what is the purpose of your scene. Is this going to be at the beginning of a play? In other words, you want to introduce your characters and the setting. Is it going to develop the plot a little bit? So you find out more about their sort of routines, their day-to-day lives, and then maybe end it with a bit of a complication. Is it going to reveal something important? So that might be the complication itself. Maybe they find something, maybe they realise they have to go on a quest. Is it going to be a turning point scene? And they're my favourite scenes, and that's when everything starts to change. Okay, so if you think about Act 2 in your play, it was only after Puck started being really silly with the love potion that suddenly everything started to change. Okay? Or is it going to maybe be the final scene in your play? So the resolution, so that's when everything comes to a head. So you need to decide what is the purpose of your scene, because that will affect your structure. Because you're only doing one scene, you could, for instance, end on a cliffhanger, or you could, if it was maybe towards the beginning of the play, you could simply end in them discovering something, but there's loads of unanswered questions. If you're doing the end of the scene, then obviously whatever you decide, there has to be some big finale where everyone either gets what they want, or if you're Shakespeare and it's a tragedy, everyone pretty much dies. If it's a turning point scene, you probably want to start the scene with everything being normal and end the scene with everything being chaotic, but you don't resolve it because it's just a scene, it's not the full story. Okay? So your task then is I want you to write a short scene involving Puck. Now, it could happen before or during or after the events in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay? It doesn't have to involve any of the other characters from A Midsummer Night's Dream, but it could if you wanted to. What you can't do though is just copy a story from A Midsummer Night's Dream. You're not doing a whole play, just a scene, so you can end it on a cliffhanger. I don't want to give you a word count, because obviously when you're doing dialogue, your word count's not going to be as big as if you were writing. But if you think of it this way, if you were typing, it should cover 2 A4 pages and you should be using font size 12. If you want to use the same style of writing as Shakespeare, if you want to use Elizabethan English, you can try, but don't worry if you find that's maybe a step too far. What I want you to do today then is think of an idea for a scene and storyboard it, okay? I'm going to make life easy on you. I want the setting to be the woods, the same woods that are in A Midsummer Night's Dream, okay? Because that's where Puck lives. But remember, the rest of it could be completely different to A Midsummer Night's Dream. Puck's been around for hundreds, probably thousands of years, so it could be a modern version of the play, okay? Decide on the characters that Puck might meet, if any, or it might just be a whole scene just with him. Decide what he wants to do. Remember, he's always up to something naughty. And then you need to decide whether or not it goes right or wrong. So storyboarding then, you can either do this by hand. A storyboard is essentially a comic strip, okay? You want to usually have about 6 squares. And you could just get a bit of paper and just draw the 6 squares out and just use little stick figures and do that. That's absolutely fine. Or you could use an app like Book Creator or Comic Life. And I want you to finish the storyboard by Thursday. Now, to make sure that we've got a chance to see what you're up to before you start writing your scene, I'm going to give you an assignment, okay, for you to complete that storyboard. Remember, I'm not looking for a beautifully drawn piece of artwork here. I'm just looking for rough ideas of how your scene's going to start, develop and finish, okay? Now, I'm not sure yet if it's going to be me or Mrs. Smith that marks these, but one of us will, and as long as we can understand where you're going, then you can start writing your scene either during the lesson on Thursday or definitely on Friday. So if you finish during the lesson on Thursday, ping it straight away to the assignment and one of us will be able to mark it. As long as you finish it by Thursday though, that's fine. And because it's a folio piece, it would be better if you did type it. Always stick to font size 12, maybe 11, but don't go any bigger or smaller than that, okay? So task reminder then, you're going to write a short scene involving Puck. It could have happened before, during or after the events in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I actually think it'd be really cool if you did it maybe in today's world, and maybe someone just happens to stumble across the same forest that Puck's still there, because he'll be there forever, remember. Or you could do it, maybe he's just finished doing all his mischief in A Midsummer Night's Dream and he's now off to annoy somebody else. Or maybe he's getting his revenge on a character from A Midsummer Night's Dream. Totally up to you. It's not a play, just a scene, so it can end on a cliffhanger. If you're typing, it should cover 2 A4 pages, font size 12. It is up to you if you want to use the same style as Shakespeare. So, all of you must plan and write a short scene script involving the character Puck. Most of you will have managed to include some dramatic techniques that we've already looked at when you've looked at the play, including characterisation, stage direction, setting, dialogue, soliloquy, and asides. Some of you might be able to use a similar style to Shakespeare. You could use Elizabethan language or even iambic pentameter. If you want to do that, then give you a hint here. You could look it up, or you could ask someone from classes 3A or 3B, because they've all just written an iambic pentameter. So I wish you all the luck in the world. Remember, if you need any help at all, I'm in your team as well as Mrs. Smith, so just ping me a question and I should be able to get back to you quickly. If you finish your storyboard fairly quickly and you've already handed it in as an assignment, again, can you please tag me on your team so that I know to go and check it straight away. Good luck!